Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this launch of the new Fusion21 list framework. We're delighted that you've been able to join us this afternoon. My name's Andrew Gray. I'm the Member Relationships Manager, and no doubt I will have met many of you over the course of the last few years. Also delighted to have Peter Beck, who's our Framework Manager, Phil Woodhead, who's the Category Manager for Compliance, and Sarah Maguire, who's the Social Value Project Manager. So you're all very welcome to today's launch. For those that may not be familiar with this software, if you haven't used it before, if you click on the orange button at the top, you can reduce the size of the panel. If you are having difficulties with sound, then you can adjust the sound settings using the audio tab. And also, if you have any questions, please do use the question button. And we will try and make sure that we address and answer as many questions as we can. If we do have any difficulties in answering all of your questions, we do keep a note of them all, and we will get back to you either collectively or individually. So that's really enough of my introduction. I'm now going to hand over to Phil, who's going to start off this afternoon's presentation. So over to Phil.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So today, what we'd like to talk to you about is our new list framework. We're really pleased to be launching that this week. It's the third generation of our list framework, and each time we do the framework, it gets better and better, and we learn from the things that work really well and improve those things that don't. And this framework is an integral part of what we're now calling our building safety and compliance offer, which within my category is something that an area that Peter is heading up. I should just say at this point, the rest of our building safety and compliance offer does come up for renewal just within the 12 months, and so this is the first segment of the new package. In terms of the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about Fusion21. Not everybody on today is a member or may know that, so very briefly, just an introduction to who we are and what Fusion21 looks like today. We're then going to go and introduce the new framework and particularly what's new with the new framework, and then go on to talk about the call-off processes and how they work. And then finally, we've got there Sarah, last but not least, talking about social value and our new social value credits model. So just to talk about Fusion21 very briefly, we've been established for quite some time, and Fusion21 operates in the public sector. So we work across multiple segments. So social housing is still the largest proportion of Fusion21's work, but between local authority, central government, blue light, education, health, we have a broad range of call-off projects growing by the day, week, month, and continues to be successful. If you look at some of those key statistics there, what I'd probably sort of point out, one of the ones in particular that's really important for us, that last one is about being a SIPS knowledge transfer partnership. One of the other elements of that is traditionally we have recruited and appointed technical people with technical knowledge and experience from the built environment, and we've invested heavily over the last 4 years in overlaying that with procurement knowledge and skills. So every single one of our project managers, associate project managers, framework managers, category managers has either done or had the opportunity to do SIPS, and I lose track of the number of people that have been through that process. So we overlay that technical knowledge with the procurement knowledge. So not only can we speak your language in terms of understanding your challenges, but we can make sure that we're getting best value and value for money in the procurement activity that we do. It's worth also saying Fusion21 in terms of where we position ourselves, it's around compliant procurement. We want good suppliers. We want to provide you with a quality service. So hopefully those things have I'm sure, sort of led to and supported the growth that we've had. And yeah, now we've got over 800 live projects and yeah, growing by the day. So if you think Fusion21, we're a not-for-profit organisation, we've got two main objectives: value for money and social value. For value for money, predominantly we deliver that through our procurement activities, and that isn't necessarily driving down the cheapest price, but it's about managing risk, it's about specifications, and that's making sure you get what you need, and sometimes that's service as well as price. You know, there's no point in having the cheapest price if the supplier isn't providing you service at the same time. So value for money is one of our two core objectives. And the other is very intrinsic in everything that we do, is social value. And we build in that into every single project that we deliver wherever we possibly can. And we do have a new credits model that we've rolled out over the last year to try and look at how every project can deliver social value. You know, in the past we've had some projects of smaller values, and it's quite hard to say, hey, we want an apprentice when the project just isn't of a size to support. So everything that we do falls within those two things underneath that sort of not-for-profit umbrella. If we go on to talk specifically about the LIFT framework, I sort of mentioned it's third generation. So if we go on to the next slide, Andrew, checking which one we've got here. The lot structure, it's worthwhile me just pointing out some of the things that we've changed and some of the things that are different from previous frameworks. So this framework, 5 lots. There is a regional split between the rest of the UK and London and the South East. That does happen to be the same split as the old framework, but when we reviewed that, actually worked quite well for the marketplace and for the members, and so we've stuck with that. Couple of changes here. So the main significant one is actually lot 2. We used to have a lot of what we called collectively managed, and the concept was to bring together members with smaller numbers of lifts, that potentially we would employ a consultant to manage those as a package on behalf of members. And if you've got 2-3 lifts, that we could do some aggregation. That didn't work out for us with the old framework, so we've not done that again. But it doesn't stop those people with a relatively small number of lifts having call-offs under lot 1, and that's the way that we would deliver and manage that in future. And if we end up with a critical mass of that, you know, we might come full circle round to looking at collectively managing future, but it didn't make sense. There wasn't enough demand to be doing that as part of this framework renewal. Instead, we've replaced lot 2 is for lower thorough examinations, and some people call those insurance inspections. We've seen in a post-Grenfell world the culture of boards and organisations and the appetite for going out of compliance just isn't there, and some organisations wanting to take more control over that. So rather than getting no access notices for buildings that are open 24/7, by taking that into direct control of the assets teams or the compliance teams, that people can have assurance of compliance, knowing that it's been done, and be proactive in managing those lower inspections. So lot 2 is new for us, and you know, we through the old framework had a few inquiries trying to deliver that through the lift consultancy lot 5, and we knew, and we tried not to do that. But I think from a member's perspective, it's to recognise that actually the lift consultants, it is a different business, it's a slightly different market in doing thorough examinations. And what we really want to do is make sure that we've separated that out. The lot 3, we've strengthened that. You know, we've got quite a few lift installations coming through last framework, and we've now got an even stronger field of suppliers to deliver that. If I look at lot 1, we've got a new specification. The old specification was a few years old, and updated for things like GDPR, etc. What else have we got there? Yeah, within lot 3, there's an emphasis around open protocol lifts, so that when lifts are upgraded and installed, you don't end up with a sort of being locked into one particular manufacturer or supplier in time. And finally, then, so lot 5 on a consultancy one, it's very similar to the old framework, but we have simplified the pricing structure there, so that actually those lift management pieces of work are more streamlined from where they were. It's not a particularly big change. So overall, it's very similar to the old framework, and we've strengthened those areas that we felt actually we needed to do that. So If we
Phil,
move on to the next
just
slide, Andrew.
before moving on, we have had one question, which was, what does LOLA stand for? I don't know if you could just quickly address address that.
So, LOLA is the Lifting Operations and Lifting Equipment Regulations, something like 1998. Essentially, it's the government regulations for lifting equipment. So that includes passenger lifts and goods lifts. If you're not familiar with it, basically the requirement is you must maintain lifts. You must undertake a thorough examination for passenger lifts every 6 months. If you take that into stair lifts, for a stair lift in a communal area, that would be caught by the LOLA regulations, but inside somebody's domestic house wouldn't. So typically that is undertaken as part of an engineering policy with the insurers, but the law does not require that. The law says it must be undertaken by an independent, competent person. Or it doesn't say it must be independent, it says should wherever possible. So that could be the same company but a different individual. Most people take that to be a separate company. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
So yes, if we talk about what's new, it's worth mentioning with this framework. So the old framework, there was no mandatory criteria for particular lots. And again, thinking of that post-Grenfell world, we wanted to demonstrate competency of the supply chain. So in the past, we haven't mandated LEIA membership, partly to keep the door open for some of those SMEs. But if you look at the barrier to entry, that's not a huge one. And if you're a reputable lift contractor, in our view, you shouldn't have any concerns about becoming an LEIA member. So we have mandated this time, and all of our suppliers on the new framework are. Similarly for lot 2, the requirement was, we set the bar quite high. We said you must be UCAS accredited and a member of SAFED or an associate member of SAFED. So doing whatever we can at framework stage to make sure every single partner on the framework is competent, and say more, in this case, by design rather than by accident. So they're very simple things that we can do to make sure that whoever you take, whoever wins a competition, whatever direct award is put in place in the framework, that from our perspective, everybody is competent for the work that they're doing. Yes, you will still need to do your own due diligence at call-off stage around the qualifications for individual engineers and supervisors, but at least at the framework stage, you could have any single one of those suppliers. I think I've covered a lot of these points already. I suppose the only sort of other one down the bottom there is around the prime cost model. So on a direct award lift installation, we do get sometimes people say this lift is urgent, it's in a hospital, or it's in a police station, it's in a building that it's in use every single day, and it needs replacing. And people don't want to spend 3, 4, 5 months doing procurement. So we did have a cost plus model in the old framework, and really what we've done is we've strengthened that. And the model is exactly the same, but we have adopted the JCT prime cost language for that. So the beauty of the PCC model within JCT, it gives a very clear definition of cost. So what is cost and what is contract fee? And so that's been adopted within the pricing model for lift installations. So Peter will talk a little about the process for how that would work, and a good example for that. If we go on to talk a little bit about the framework itself, I think we missed a slide there. No, benefits of the framework. So obviously, we talked about the competency of the suppliers. We've gone through references, we've gone through case studies, etc., etc., as part of the tender process, and we've got a really good field, a really strong field this time. And we did before, but I think we've strengthened that. Regional presence and national presence. So pretty much our goal at framework stage is to make a flexible framework that can meet your needs, whatever they might be. Particularly from there is a localism agenda within local authorities. It's really pleasing from our perspective to see that we've got 84% of those suppliers are SMEs. We sort of looked at the lot scope, and it's quite a broad range of services, specifically around lifts and lifting equipment. The framework comes with detailed specifications. So, lift maintenance specification was written by Dunbar and Boardman, and that goes to strengthen the framework, and that's free for you to use when you're using the framework as part of a call-off process. Obviously, it's just been competitively tendered, so these frameworks are all live and bang up to date, and it was interesting to see how some of the price moves from the old framework to this framework. But yeah, so we're up to date. And I suppose also worth most saying, Fusion21, our teams monitor the suppliers on an ongoing basis, month by month, quarter by quarter. So basically, we're checking insurances, accreditations, all those sorts of things along the way, and there is ongoing support. So if you've got a call off and you're having an issue with a contractor, and the reality is you're a single client of theirs with a single contractor, what leverage do you have? Some of the advantages that we have is we have tens of call offs with some of these suppliers. Potentially we have a little bit more clout, and there's a bit more of a carrot there to incentivize contractors to do what they need to do. And we do have some mechanisms that if they're not performing, we can prevent them from receiving further work through the framework, either on a temporary or a permanent basis. So there is some additional layers of support that you get with the framework that you wouldn't get if you tendered something directly for yourselves. Next slide, please, Andrew. Great. So yeah, the framework itself, we've got a new Delta portal that we're using. We moved away from My Tenders. So full open framework tender process through Delta, and the price quality split was 60-40 at framework stage. Our framework agreements often have a sort of discretionary, a tolerance for call-off stage, so to vary that in this instance by 20% either way. So you could go 40 quality, 60 price, call-off stage if that's what you wanted to do, for example. Next slide, please. Great. So in terms of the process, obviously we've got a contract notice there. The contract award notice will follow when that gets published. I think a really important point for me around the design of the process to appoint these suppliers, yes, we wanted to tease through the competency piece I talked earlier, but what we also wanted to do was, too often we've seen in the past, and we've been guilty of this at times, is who's got the best bid writer and who can tell the best story. And what we really wanted to do was get underneath that to say, well, no, it's not who can tell the best story, but who is the best contractor. So from a technical quality perspective, we introduced some changes with this particular framework to try and tease that through. A couple of examples for that. On the passenger lift maintenance, we said, give us a list of all of the lifts that you maintain. And we chose 20 at random, and we said we'd like to see the loader certificates for those lifts. And obviously a loader certificate is carried out independently, and we were scoring them against recurring defects. So if there's things that we and our expert support felt that actually that should have been remedied, why wasn't it, you would get marked down as a contractor. So the good contractors were cooperative in the process, sharing their data, they'd be keeping good loader records, they'd been asking their clients if they hadn't been receiving them, they'd been dealing with the defects and making sure they weren't reoccurring, and quite happy to support through that process, versus some contractors that at the other end of the spectrum weren't comfortable sharing the data or talking to their clients and getting an NDA signed. They maybe hadn't done the remedial works or hadn't asked for loader certificates, or they might have done but not kept the records. So when you think about what's the difference between a good contractor and a bad contractor, that's definitely something we felt was a differentiator, and that really did come through in the process. So it was a learning experience for us, but I think it comes down to who are the good contractors versus who are the bad contractors, not who can tell us a good story versus who can't tell us a good story. And so that was very successful, but there were other components that we tried to build into that. For example, not can you tell us about your health and safety, but can you give us a risk assessment? And we reviewed those risk assessments. Are they appropriate control measures? Is it an appropriate template? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there is always going to be that, can you tell us how you do X, Y, Z? But I think actually getting the balance right this time around. I mentioned expert support. We did bring in expert support to look at loader examinations and writing specifications and things like that. Just a point of clarity, whilst Cundles and TVC were helping the process, they were not involved in Lot 5 for consultancy on the basis that there would be a conflict of interest in that. So overall, we had a good selection of bids. We've got 32 successful and 15 there were unsuccessful, different reasons being bids withdrawn, supply selection, or price quality evaluation. And we'll go on to sort of tell you shortly who those suppliers are. Over to you, Peter.
Hello. So yeah, here we have a list of appointed suppliers alphabetically. If you were to look on our website, it will show you who's appointed to which lot. So a couple of names that we've had from before and a couple of new ones. So as Phil said, hopefully a much stronger offer. Next slide, please, Andrew. So call-off options. We've a number of options. There's the direct award, which will be on the contract, the supplier's submitted schedule of rates. And we see the majority of consultant call-offs due to the size of the contracts that would be direct awards. We've got direct award with negotiation, so of course we'd use the schedule of rates where applicable, but if there was anything that you required that was outside of the ITT, there is an option for negotiation, or as Phil said, with the lift install, we've got the prime cost and contract fee option. And then we've got the further competition, which is the opportunity for you to put forward your specific requirements based on your assets, your needs, giving the contractors the opportunity to price on that specific contract. Finally, with the two-stage further competition, but we only expect to use this where a contract is for a significant number of lift installs over multiple years. Next slide, please, Andrew. So the direct award process, we've given an idea of what we would think was best practice, for example, for an urgent lift. We would always say, go to a consultant, potentially from lot 5 on a direct award, or use your retained lift consultant to produce a specification built on your needs. This could typically take 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the complexity, because they're going to have to visit site and issue a specification. So we then identify a lift contractor, an installer from lot 3, based on the criteria I'll go into in the next slide. They would then visit site, price the works, and give the proposal. If we're using a consultant, the consultant can verify the proposal on technology and suitability, and also advise on the costs. Next slide, please, Andrew. So Schedule 13 of the framework agreement allows the member with a robust business case not necessarily to use the #1 ranked. This could be by reference to the brief, specification, specialism, value for money based on total cost of ownership and life cycle costing, geographical location in certain circumstances, capacity of contractors, number of call-offs they've got, or indeed poor performance in the past. Next slide, please, Andrew. Further competition process, we would speak with you and help you develop a brief. As Phil said, we have an updated specification which you can add to your own specific requirements, and we develop the documents with you and issue the ITT through the Delta portal if required, or you can of course use your own platform. We help with the evaluation and carry out all the financial sides. We always ask that the member carries out the quality evaluation. Then we'll notify suppliers if done through the Delta portal ourselves. If you're doing it yourselves, we have standard letters which will help with, and we'll issue a call-off agreement or contract based on your requirements and the suitability for the type of works. Next slide, please, Andrew. We offer 4 service levels. First one, direct award process as outlined previously. We also offer access only, which will be minimal input from Fusion21. All we ask is we have sight of your documents before you publish them, and we offer to be a critical friend if we can help in any way or offer any advice. We also offer managed procurement, where you may have your consultant specification, and we procure documents supplied by yourselves or the consultant, or a partnership, which is a full turnkey, in which case we do everything we can to help you. Next slide, please. So price mechanism for suppliers on the framework is covered by clause 22, and they are able to approach us for an annual adjustment on their direct award rates. We would always ask them to evidence any request, and they have to do this 45 days before the anniversary of the framework agreement. They need to provide the rationale and any steps they've taken to mitigate any price change. And when we say price change, that can be price change up or down. This may be labour costs, equipment costs, fuel, insurances, accreditations, new congestion charges in certain areas, or local taxation. And next slide, please, Andrew. So who can use the framework? Anyone sort of spending public money, local government, central government, social housing, education, NHS and trust, blue light organisations, or any not-for-profit organisations. So I'd like to pass you over to my colleague Sarah, who's going to talk about our social value offer.
That's brilliant, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes setting out how Fusion21 builds social value into our frameworks generally, but also how we specifically have built it into the LIFTS framework and how we'll build it in going forward. And the reason behind that really is to look at how we can support suppliers and members to work together to achieve the best possible social value outcomes for your areas. So we've referenced some of the policy considerations there around social value with the Public Service Act in 2012 and also the Best Value statutory guidance. But more important than that, we deliver social value as an organisation because it's what you, our members, want from us. So we've delivered social value as an organisation since 2002, which is 10 years ahead of the Social Value Act. And it continues to be a really integral part of the frameworks that we deliver. In terms of how social value will be delivered, as Phil said earlier, we've done a lot of work over the last 12 months, looking at how we can refine our offer and make it wider in terms of moving away from the traditional employment and skills agenda and looking at a model which encompasses more in terms of delivery that suppliers will be able to support members with. I'll have the next slide, please, Andrew. So this is some more detail about the how and the why. So what we intend is that our suppliers will have a conversation with our members at the earliest possible stage. As Phil said earlier, we have over 600 members at Fusion21 now. It isn't possible for our social value team to know what's important to every single member in terms of the community development needs in their neighbourhoods. What we hope is that there'd be a conversation between the supplier and the member to identify those needs and then look at how the supplier can support the member to deliver against them. So we've moved away from that traditional employment and skills model to a service credit model, where we expect our suppliers to deliver 10 service credits for every £100,000 of work. And we as an organisation monitor that every 3 months through a social value delivery plan. We accept responsibility for collating all of that information, for pulling it together from our suppliers, and then for feeding it back to our members. Next slide, thank you. So this is the credit model. So as you'll see, there's a lot more on there rather than just the traditional apprentices and employment. As Phil said, with some of the contracts, especially the smaller contracts, it isn't appropriate for us to be asking them to take on an apprentice. And it wouldn't be sustainable actually if we asked them to do that, because if it's a contract that only lasts 6 months, a year, they won't be able to see out that apprentice and give the young person the support that they need. So instead, we've got a much wider menu of options which allows for the member to look at what it is that's needed in their local area. So it may be actually that you're working with a group of young people that could do with some pre-education, pre-employment support. You may have a supplier that is willing to act as a mentor, and actually that would achieve what's needed in terms of this social value credit model. Thank you, Andrew. So final slide from me, and just to sum up, we've really rethought the way that we deliver social value as an organisation so that it's specific. At the start of every call off, we would like there to be a conversation between supplier and member to create project specific plans. And we've created a really straightforward way of reporting that back into the organisation on a 3-month basis, as I said. We're only a small team of social value employees at Fusion, but we're a dedicated resource there to support you, to support the suppliers and support the members. So the email address is there for Rachel, my colleague. You can use that for any questions, or obviously I'll be happy to answer them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So I think back to Peter, but just a quick update from me in terms of feel free to continue to ask any questions you have. Peter, we have had one question which related to what you were saying before, and perhaps you could just address that now, is how long is the list of contractors fixed for? And if we, the member, had an existing lift contractor who wishes to join the list, can this take place?
Well, Fusion21 frameworks are fixed for 4 years. And as we're a new lift, we won't be taking any new contractors onto this particular framework until the next framework. So unfortunately, if they're not on there, it's difficult.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's just, sorry to interrupt you there, Peter, it's just worth mentioning that when we went out to the market for the framework, we did signpost every single LEIA member to the framework, the fact that we were publishing it, and obviously there was a public notice. So your incumbent supplier, if they are an LEIA member, did have the opportunity to apply for the framework, and for whatever reason chose not to. So.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, so I'll be the operational lead on lifts. So if anyone has any specific questions outside of this presentation, I'll be your first point of contact. If you haven't time to copy down my email address and number, you can get in contact with me through the info box on the website, or just by ringing the Fusion21 main number, and they'll put you through to me. Next slide, please, Andrew. So, framework award. The agreements have been signed by DocuSign with all the suppliers, and the framework's been live since the 6th of July, which was Monday. The contract award notice is in process. And as I mentioned over the previous question, the framework expiry is the 5th of July 2024. Next slide, please, Andrew. So just to recap, benefits of membership of Fusion21. There's no joining fee, there's no annual fee. The frameworks are free to use at point of use. Fusion21 are a not-for-profit organisation offering compliant frameworks, ISO accredited. Of course, we've got the social value offer described by Sarah earlier, and you also get, as Phil alluded to, procurement expertise from 6 qualified and experienced specialists. Now, we don't purport to be lift specialists, but we do understand them and understand your needs. We also have gas engineers, chartered surveyors, chartered construction managers, and technical backup within the team. There are flexible approaches to sourcing and procurement to meet your requirements, and we will always try and help. And we have other things such as the Section 20 toolkit to support you with your leaseholder consultation, and we hold regular member forums, which all members are invited to discuss best practice and problems. And next slide, please, Andrew. And over to Andrew.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, with that slide is just as a little aid for me in terms of just to remind you to please complete our procurement trend survey. This is an annual survey that we undertake. If you haven't already had a direct link to the survey, then it is available on our website. So if I can go back to the Q&A and just say in terms of a couple of questions come in, and please continue to send your questions in. So I think this is for Peter. Can you tell me how stage payments are managed for lift replacement contracts?
For lift replacement contracts, we have a number of options as to which contract to use. We can use the LEA contract, or we've quite often used a JCT, which we can produce. The stage payments are generally 30% on order, because there's a high cost of the equipment, and then 30% on delivery. Now that can be negotiated, but we generally try and follow the LEA model with the stage payments, and then after that it reverts to the normal payments with a retention. At the end, quite often our lift suppliers prefer not to have retention, and they offer a bond through LEA, their organisation, where it covers the retention. If anything goes wrong or the lift contractor disappears, LEA will appoint someone to finish or rectify the problem. Is that okay? Yeah,
I think so. Again, if any of the questions you do want to follow up, we're making a note, and if there isn't, we've got that detail to follow up. So the next question is, what is the percentage in the background you recover from this framework? So I assume by that that's any sort of recovery of fees that Fusion take from the suppliers. I don't know whether Phil or Peter, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that one up. I mean, Fusion21 standard fee is 4%, and that's fairly universal across all our frameworks. But we do discount that based on the value of the project and the level of service. So it depends on your needs. We don't publish that table because it is subject to change. But we put those discount schedules in place to make sure that all of our members can have a discount, and that we discount that in a fair way, but based on your needs. So if you're somebody that just wants access to documents, access only, and it's a relatively small value project, that will be a different fee to somebody that comes on and says, you know what, we've got 15 years to replace over 3 years, and we'd like to tender it all in one go, and we want you to do everything. And so that's a conversation we'd have on a project by project basis, and Peter, will your best, if you've got a particular project that we're very happy to share those fees. We just don't include them in presentations such as these. So anything up to, and to give you a range, 4% is the highest our fee, and I don't think we very rarely does it go below 1%. But you know, when we get into the construction team and they're into you know, tens of millions of pounds worth of projects, then you know, that's a conversation at that point in time.
So the next question is in two parts. First is, can you confirm how long it takes to become a member? And I'll answer that. It can be a very quick process, so long as you are an eligible organisation. If you go to our website, you click on the membership tab, you'll be able to complete a small, relatively short form, and then we can process your application very quickly from there. The second part, which is then I think for you, Peter, how long, so how does it work if I already have a lift quote for repairs from to a lift from one of the suppliers on your framework? So again, I assume that is about how they might convert that quote into a call off from the framework.
Providing the supplier was eligible for a direct call off, we have the two options. They may need to look at their pricing and submit a price relevant to the framework price, or use the prime cost model, which should be quite simple because they will have their equipment costs and they will have given us their contract fee.
Okay, next question. Sorry, Philip.
Sorry,
Phil.
mentioning with the prime cost model, I sort of talked earlier in the presentation about how well defined those costs are within the definition. So essentially, it's a transparent pricing model that says what is the cost of the labour, what is the cost of the parts and the materials, glue that all together and add on the contractor's pre-agreed overhead and profit. So if you're not sure whether the parts are at the right price, for us that should be transparent. So we want to see on your behalf invoices from the supplier to substantiate the cost they put forward. And if they can't do that, arguably we say, well, it's not transparent, and that's the model that it's based on. So in contractual terms, you pay the actual cost that it costs them plus their contract fee. So if you move the specification, move the goalpost, and suddenly it costs them more, well, yes, it's going to cost you more, but the fee, their contract fee for overhead and profit is pre-agreed. The risk that you then take is, could you got a cheaper part via another supply chain, or is another contractor's labour cheaper, or could another contractor's labour have done it in shorter period of time because they're more specialist for that particular type of equipment. So there are some risks that you take using a prime cost model, but often, you know, the reason we're getting into that discussion of doing it that way around is more that time is the overriding factor. And many clients, if they're right against the wall, they might say, you know what, we can accept some risk, but we don't want to give the contractors carte blanche. And we find that the prime cost is a good balance in that scenario.
So next, is there a schedule of rates for repairs to lifts?
We have a number of items, but we also have labour rates and on costs, so we can produce a schedule of rates.
Okay, the next question, which I think we've already answered, which is the framework rebate fee. So that's I think we've already covered that. Yes, we will be sharing this presentation, and also a copy of the slides will also be available. I'll just pause a little while and just sort of say final opportunity for anyone to ask any further questions, and if none come through, then I really just want to wrap up by thanking you all for attending this afternoon. As the presenters have said, if you have any particular issues, do contact us directly. It can be direct to email or telephone. You can also contact us through the website. Please look out for future webinars. We are continuing to run a series of webinars on topical issues. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to our presenters, and we look forward to being in touch. Sorry, there is one final question. Is the contract for a minimum of 4 years as per the framework? I think the answer to that is no. You can have a contract for any length of time you like, but perhaps Peter and Phil, you could just answer that final question.
No, there's no minimum, and you can call off for up to 4 years after the framework.
Okay, excellent. Right, so thank you all very much, and as we say in these current times, please stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.